Hi, this is Rattlesnake Movie. He was the youngest soldier during the Second World War. At the age of 6, he made a great achievement in the war. He dragged his weak body through the fire and crawled forward. He was not afraid to face the cruel war, because he also wanted to make a small contribution to the victory of his country. This film is based on a true story. His name is Sergei. A few days ago, he had a happy childhood and a beautiful family, but the war soon spread to his hometown. Bullets passed through the chests of his family. The flames destroyed the entire village. Only young Sergei escaped alone. He couldn't help but look back. There was nothing he could do in the face of the brutal war. That was the last time he looked back at his hometown. Sergei fled into a forest. He didn't get very far before he got lost. Weak and helpless, he cried out. Even so, Sergei remained strong. When he was hungry, he ate the wild fruits of the forest to satisfy his hunger. When he was thirsty, he drank rainwater with his small hands. When his shoes were torn, he wrapped them with bark. Sergei walked to the river, drinking heavily from the river. At that moment, he heard soldiers talking nearby. Sergei rushed to hide in a hole in a tree, but a poisonous snake was hovering above his head. He covered his mouth and did not dare to make a sound. The German soldiers in front of him were more frightening than the snake. After they left, Sergei dared to go out and pick up their leftover food. In this gloomy jungle, it was hard for an adult to survive, let alone a 6-year-old child. Hungry and cold, he soon fainted. Fortunately, however, a few Soviet company scouts found him and brought him back to the barracks. The crowd saw the battered child. Soon they all gathered around. When Sergei woke up, he was still shivering. He stood up and shook hands with the officer. His poor and well-behaved appearance makes everyone very heartbroken. Even the usually stern officer showed his tender side. Someone asked Sergei, "Where is your family?" Hearing this, he could not hold back any longer. Sergei was placed in a rescue shelter. Everyone here loved this lively and smart boy, especially the head nurse. It wasn't long before the chief came to visit him. He is usually highly nervous and can only smile in front of Sergei. Sergei wanted to play with a gun, so he unloaded the bullets and let him have a good time. Sergei drew a tank on his stomach. Even at a young age, he wants to win as soon as possible. His sweet innocence washed away the pain of the wounded. He brought joy to the soldiers, a touch of color to the cruel and gray battlefield. But after all, children don't belong here. They had to send Sergei away. When they found out that the child was being sent away, the soldiers were very sad. On behalf of the regiment, the veterans asked their commanders to keep Sergei. They said that they could take care of the child, because Sergei was the only one who could bring them happiness. But the officer refused. But in fact, the officer was the one who missed the child the most. On the day when Sergei was to be sent away, he was so sad that he left tears in his eyes. The officer was also very sad. He took out a wooden pistol and gave it to Sergei. Sergei threw his arms around the officer's neck. His childish voice kept hitting the man's heart. Although they hadn't spent much time together, but the only one who thought about him was Sergei. He was touched by the child's kind heart.
Слушай, хочешь быть моим сыном?
А это можно?
The officer finally couldn't let go of him. He decided to adopt Sergei, to make him his own son. The soldiers were very happy to hear that Sergei was left behind. They made a small uniform overnight. The next day Sergei wore the uniform. He ran around the barracks happily. He finally got his wish to stay in the army. But then the German fighters launched an air raid. The officer rushed to hold Sergei in his arms. The artillery fire shattered Sergei's naivety. The soldiers suffered heavy losses. Sergei also saw the cruel side of the war for the first time. He went up to the soldiers and asked them about their injuries. He also wanted to do something for them. The medic picked up Sergei. He told him to protect himself. The cruel war will not be merciful to you because you are a child. Sergei didn't give up. He ran into the house to take care of the wounded soldiers and read a letter from his family to a blind veteran. Although he couldn't read or write, but he knew how to comfort the soldiers who missed their families. Sergei sang songs to make everyone happy, encouraging everyone to achieve the final victory. The attacked battlefield was in chaos. Sergei saw a sewing machine blown to pieces. He thought of the tailor who made his clothes. He followed his officer and took off his hat. He paid tribute to the fallen soldiers. At the age of 6, he shaved his beard like an adult. He saluted the soldiers who passed by in a dignified manner. As a young soldier, Sergei wanted to do something for everyone, so he volunteered to deliver letters to the soldiers at the front. They were very happy to see Sergei, because they were waiting for news from home all the time. But to get the letters, Sergei had to fulfill one request, and that was to dance a little. Only Sergei could bring them joy on the relentless battlefield. A young boy of 6 years old walks through the trenches, although he can't carry a gun and fight like an adult, but he can deliver letters to the soldiers. When he called out to a soldier, he didn't answer. The old soldier called out to him. Then he told him that the soldier had died with honor. Knowledgeable children take off their hats to soldiers. He slowly left the trench. On the way back, Sergei noticed something unusual with his binoculars. There is a moving shoe in the haystack, so he went back to the soldiers and reported to them. Sure enough, the soldiers had caught 2 German scouts. Sergei also found an enemy radio in the grass. Although he had done a great service, but he was very modest and said that it was his duty. Once again, there was a new war. Young Sergei crossed the trenches under fire. He was delivering ammunition to the soldiers. When the veterans saw him, they told him to leave, but he didn't want to go. He wanted to help the soldiers defend themselves against the invaders. The old soldier shouted orders for his safety. Sergei had to obey the order. After returning to the command post, he heard someone say that the communication line had been cut by enemy fire, so he secretly followed the telephone line. He was undaunted by the enemy's fierce attack. Finally, he found the place where the telephone line had been broken. Sergei tried to connect the wires together. Sure enough, communication was restored. After the war, Sergei followed the troops to the rear for repairs, but the car was blown up by the enemy's mines. Sergei was dizzy from the explosion. He saw the soldiers lying on the ground, helpless. His father was also wounded. After the repair, Sergei went back to the chief to get the mission. This time the mission was to check the soldiers' supplies. Everyone was very happy to see Sergei. They gave him all the chocolate they could not eat. Sergei wanted to take them, but he refused. Seriously, he said that he had to carry out his orders. Sergei told the company commander to gather the troops. He carefully checked the equipment of the soldiers, and asked the company commander to help him to record the supplies needed for the men. Finally, he handed the list to the commander. His father was very proud to see his son doing so well. At night the enemy attacked again. Sergei skillfully jumped into the trench. However, the officer was buried underneath. He went to the rescue, braving the fire. With his disdainful efforts, he rescued his father. The officer was saved in time. Seeing his father lying there, covered with wounds, the usually strong Sergei could not help but leave tears in his eyes. Dad said comfortingly,
Не плачь. Мужчины не плачут.
Sergei then obediently dried his tears. Finally, the war was over. The team went to many battlefields, and at the end of the group, there was always a small figure. For his bravery on the battlefield, Sergei received the Order of Glory of the Soviet Guards. He became a real soldier as he wished. Sergei's story is based on a true story, a war story told through a child's point of view. It brings a different kind of feeling and heartache to everyone. He was the youngest soldier in the Russian army during World War II. Sergei Aleshkov, a child should not belong on the battlefield, but he always contributed to the war effort. This is Sergei's life. Subscribe to me, and we'll see you next time.